Rex here. In this video, we're going to actually be picking out our long-range cartridges based on the selection procedure that we discussed in the video before this one. So if you missed the video before this one, we discuss in detail long-range cartridge dynamics. So you might want to check that out before you roll on to this one. Otherwise, you might not really know what we're trying to accomplish. This is going to be a lot of staring at charts. So get your eyeballs ready. Here we go. Okay, so let me show you how this streamlined cartridge elimination process works. This is actually kind of fun once we get going with our chart here. So let's try it. Here is my little table I made up. I don't have all the potential long-range cartridges listed here, obviously, but I just listed some of the real popular ones that come to mind. So if you don't see your particular choices listed here, just pick one that is ballistically similar to get a general idea of what's going on. Again, this is not a chart that anyone would use to do any long-range calculations. It's only a comparison chart. The loads listed here are what I would consider common or typical long-range loadings for those specific cartridges, just to give you an idea of how it works. So one thing you'll notice that I did on my chart here is I have added in that ammo availability letter code column that we just talked about. Now this may vary for different areas, like I said before, but it accurately represents the ammo availability situation in my area. Yours might be a little different. You'll also see the column towards the right hand side that lists the maximum supersonic range of cartridge loadings. This is basically our maximum effective range of the cartridge, like we talked about before. Another thing you'll notice on my chart is my three separate columns that are titled remaining energy, wind deflection, and bullet drop are each broken up into 500, 1,000, and 1,500 meter increments. Three different subcategories of each one of those. Again, this is just giving us a basic representation of the ballistic character of these various cartridge selections. Not something you'd use to construct any kind of tables, but we're just comparing cartridges. I also had the muzzle velocity, muzzle energy, and ballistic coefficients listed on the original table, but I had to kind of compress this all down so that you can actually see it through that crappy little screen you might be watching on. So let us select a long-range cartridge for a given particular purpose using this chart that we have just constructed. Okay, let's try to get a cartridge choice. This is going to be a rifle that is for a woman who wants to shoot deer and targets, and she wants a handy rifle that has light recoil. And let's see what we can come up with here for cartridge selection. So the main criteria, as you can see on the top of the deal here, is light recoil. So what does that mean? Well, you can look at the bottom of your list there, the 338, 408, 416, the 50s. The recoil and muzzle blast are going to be uncomfortable for a shooter who might not be real used to shooting a lot. So we'll just go ahead and cross those off. Those will be the first ones we'll cross off. Recoil we can combine with like muzzle blast factor as well. You can also look at some of these other cartridges are going to have a little more recoil than the others. 300 Remington Ultra Magnum definitely is not a light recoil rifle. 300 Win Mag, your 7mm Ultra Mag, and your Remington Mag, and then your big belted Magnums here, your 264. We'll check those off as well. Those are not what I would call a light recoil rifle for this person's purposes here. Okay. This is a target rifle. So we got to find out how far are we shooting. Well, let's say like 1,000 meters is what she wants to have in her rifle. So we need to look at our maximum supersonic range category over here on the right-hand side. And we're going to go through and look at all the numbers, okay? The maximum supersonic range is basically the maximum effective range of that cartridge load combination. So we'll cross off like the 5.56, the 223, and the 6.8 SPC. Those are not going to get us out to 1,000 meters quite. So cross those off like that. All right, see, we got it narrowed down quite a bit already. Our next criteria is she's primarily going to use this for target shooting, but possibly medium-sized game like deer. So let's go ahead and look at our energy column, because this is the order of priority that suits her needs the best. So energy, if you notice, the 243 was shining up until this point, but the energy, if she's going to want to use this for deer at 1,000 meters, the remaining energy in our 1,000-meter column, that kind of light green color, is only 388 foot-pounds. That's questionable. It'll probably kill a deer, but that's not the degree of lethality we might be looking for in a hunting rifle. So the 260 Remington and the 6.5 to 284 Norma, those are both a lot better. Those are going to be within our range. That's going to be a lot more lethal than the 243. The 7mm 08's even better at 648 foot-pounds. That should be a little better. And then our 308s and our 30-06, surprisingly, are lower than those choices in foot-pounds, because we discussed ballistic coefficient before. Apparently, these projectiles with their lower ballistic coefficients than the 400s and the lower 500s did not keep up their velocity like these other ones did with the higher ballistic coefficients, and so they lost a lot of energy once they got out to 1,000 meters. So actually, your smaller, lighter calibers in this case are outperforming the 30 calibers because of the higher ballistic coefficients. So that's how that works out there. So let's kind of zoom in more. We're thinking more like the 260, the 6.5 to 284 Norma, and the 7mm 08 Remington. Some people might be a little intimidated by the 6.5 to 284 Norma. It's a little weird. It's kind of a strange caliber for the United States too. It's not something you can just go and buy shells for easily. So with those issues, we're just going to cross that off the list for now, because she's going to want to be able to just go pick up ammo at the local store. And we're going to also cross off the 30-06. Just because of recoil issue. We want a light recoil. That was our primary criteria for this particular weapons package. So that leaves us with the 260 Remington and the 7mm 08 and possibly the 243, but we sort of ruled that out for power. So now let's compare the external ballistics. We're going to look at the drop and the wind deflection, because if we're shooting targets, that's going to be pretty important. We want the least amount of wind deflection possible. So we're going to highlight those. You'll notice the 243 is, let's look at the wind deflection column. That's the blue column there. The wind deflection is 9.1 minutes of angle, and the 260 is a little better at 8.9. The trajectory is a tiny bit flatter on the 243 than it is with the 260. The wind is probably going to be more important of a factor. We can precisely adjust for our drop, but the wind is going to be a little trickier, so that'll be more desirable to have a better wind cutting ability. The 7mm 08 really did good at 7.9 minutes of wind deflection at 1,000 meters. And as you can see, the 308s compared to the others were quite a bit higher with wind deflection. They got pushed around a lot more, 13 minutes and 12 minutes at those two loadings listed there. So we're going to use that and eliminate the 308. Now, if this was not going to be so much a deer rifle, but be a combat rifle or like some kind of backup military kind of rifle and a target rifle, maybe we would opt to actually go for the 308s, even though the external ballistics are not as desirable as these sporting cartridges. But in this case, she's looking for a deer rifle, so we'll just we'll cross off the 308. So that leaves us with basically our 260 and our 7mm 08. Let's look at those a little more closely. Basically, you can tell here that the 7mm 08 is ballistically superior, particularly with the wind. I think that's going to be the best choice for this particular weapons package, which is specifying a light recoil. The 7mm 08 should be relatively mild, especially in a target rifle, which that's our next criteria. So we want a target rifle. It's going to perform pretty well ballistically. It's going to actually have better external ballistics than the 30-06, which most people would consider to be a bigger caliber. Deer rifle, it still has plenty energy. It's actually there in that category again. It's outperforming even the 30-06 for comparison. in foot-pounds of energy at 1,000 meters. And this one, even if you pay attention over here on the max supersonic range, over here in the green on the right side, this thing's max range actually is 1,500 meters, and this is calibrated for sea level. That'll change with air density. It'll be able to shoot farther at higher altitudes, most likely, as the air will be thinner. So this will be a really good target rifle. It'll go quite a bit farther than the 260 and the 243, which were 1,100 meter guns, and the 30-06 was about 1,200 meters. So this is a really good choice. Actually, the 7mm 08 is one of my personal favorites for efficient long-range cartridge that really does a lot for the small package you get. So this is it's basically a 308 case, neck down to 7mm. Reloading components should be readily available, like 7mm bullets are easy to find. And mostly what we had going for this cartridge was the high ballistic coefficient, being that it is a 7mm projectile, which mathematically, the 7mm have excellent ballistic coefficients. It's just the way it worked out mathematically for that particular size. So that will be the choice for that. So there's an example of how to go through one of these potential long-range cartridge sheets that we're making on the before video, and go through and eliminate all the stuff that does not meet our prioritized criteria. So we narrowed that down just in like 5 minutes. We didn't have to spend hours and hours of debate or surfing different people's commentaries. We made a logical, streamlined decision based on actual data, which really narrowed it down. So let's look at another one real quick. Okay, now the potential results you could get from this are like, there's a million different ways you could come up with an answer, depending on what your criteria is. So when you're doing this, you're going to have to list out your own particular needs for your weapon system and then do it on that. But let's do another one just because these are so much fun. A real common one that people are looking for is when they're watching these long-range videos and they want to get into this is extreme range rifle. Okay, what's extreme range? Well, I can tell you it's going to be at least 1,000 yards, right? So let's go ahead and index over to our max supersonic range, which is our maximum effective range column, and cross off all the stuff that ain't going to get us out to at least 1,000. So that would like rule out your 223s, obviously, and your 6.8. There it went bye-bye. Okay. Let's say like 1,200 plus. So we can narrow it down a little further. 1,200 is really, really far. People don't realize how far that is until they try shooting that far. I mean, that's pretty far. So let's go ahead and cross off and check all these ones that are like 11 and 1,200 so we can narrow down our choices further. Okay, let's cross those guys off. That took care of your 30-06, basically, and your 308s. They went bye-bye. Okay. This guy who wants this extreme range rifle also is a little bit worried about World War III, Red Dawn type situation. Okay, well now we have to really pay attention to our energy and then our ammo availability as well, most likely for this kind of a situation. So let's narrow it down by energy here. We're defending his ranch. Okay, so we're defending the ranch from foreign invaders from China or someplace, I suppose. Okay, let's look at actually, in a World War III situation, ammo availability is going to be extremely important. So let's go ahead and just automatically rule out of stuff that ain't already ruled out for their range requirements, stuff with poor ammo availability, like our level C's and D's. I think they're going to all go bye-bye. So like your 6.5 Norma, your 264 Win Mag, that's a little bit weird to get a hold of in some areas. Like in my area it would be, maybe in yours it wouldn't. Even the 7mm 08, you wouldn't be able to find that in every common grocery store, probably. 7mm Remington Ultra Magnum, your Ultra Mags, the 338 Lapua, you can't really find that a lot of places up where I'm at, so I'm going to have to mark that off for this guy. Maybe in your area, they sell that stuff just down at the gas station, but in mine they don't. You have to kind of special order it. And then obviously your 408 Chey Tac and your 416 Barrett, that's going to be extremely difficult to find rounds for. So all those got crossed off the list. What does that basically leave us with? Well, we got three choices here. We have the 7mm Remington Ultra Mag, and the 300 Winchester Magnum, and the 50 BMG. Okay, let's narrow it down a little further. Let's look at the extreme range part. Okay, let's go back to our maximum supersonic range, and out of these three, which ones ain't measuring up as good as the others? Well, you notice the 7mm's got a max effective range of 1,700 meters, whereas the 300's only got 1,300. So let's just go ahead and zap the 300 off the list. Now, I suppose you got two kind of completely different animals. You got a 7mm Remington Magnum and a 50 BMG. This is for extreme range. Both of them are going to get you past 600, or 1,600 meters, I'm sorry, that's a mile. 1,760 yards is a mile. This is extreme range, these two. We're well over 1,200 yards. And in World War III, this guy who's defending his ranch is going to be able to readily obtain 7mm Magnum ammo in his area of operations. That's pretty common where he's from. And 50 BMG may not be so readily available for the sporting cartridges. That's why there's two different columns there. The 750 grain AMAXs that are really going to give him extreme range, like 2,700 meters. But with the standard M33 military loadings, he's still going to be able to get out to 1,600 meters pretty accurately. So, and those military loadings should be readily available in a war zone, I would assume. Usually seem to be. So, if that's the case, if an anti-material is his objective, let's say he's worried about like army tanks, or well, that ain't going to help him against army tanks, but APCs rolling his ranch or something, or vehicles coming at him or something. The 50 caliber is going to be his choice if he's worried about anti-material purposes. Most likely he's not. He's going to probably want the ability to carry more ammo. That's going to be more of a real-world type deal. So let's go ahead and go for the 7mm Remington Magnum in this case. He'll be able to carry a reasonable amount of shells. His max range is 1,700 meters. His ammo is reasonably available, and his external ballistics are excellent in pretty much all categories. So 7mm Remington Magnum is a really good choice as well for a good all-purpose long-range cartridge. Well, that was a lot of fun. I could do those all day long. But rather than going through this chart just repeatedly for every possible different application, that's going to take a million years. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go ahead and make up your own chart with the cartridges available in your area, like we talked about on the video before. And you're going to want to do elimination based on your priorities. And it shouldn't take long if you do a systematic breakdown, basically similar to what we've done here, to narrow down your choices real quick like. So, what we should do now is just visit a little bit. We'll just kind of look at the chart here, and rather than going through it, but there's a few of these cartridges that really are kind of my personal picks for long-range applications. And I'll just kind of share with you, this is my opinion. There's lots of other cartridges out there that are really good, but this is just from my experience. If you look down the chart, one of my favorite groups is, if you look at your, and they're not arranged this way on the chart, but the 308 based cartridges that are a 308 neck down to the smaller calibers, those things are really good cartridges, especially in the 6.5 millimeters and the 7 millimeters. As we talked about earlier, and you probably noticed by looking at the chart here, your 7 millimeter projectiles are having a really good ballistic coefficient. Now, this is just for the AMAX. If you go with the Burgers, you can even get a better ballistic coefficient in the 7 millimeter. That's really phenomenal. That's an excellent choice, actually, for hunting as well. The AMAX is kind of a target bullet, but if you're going to use this for hunting, and we'll talk about this more on the bullet video, Long Range 101 bullet selection. But the 625 ballistic coefficient's doing really good. So if you want a good light recoiling like we discussed on one of the other ones, that's an excellent, handy, easy to carry rifle package that's going to get you really good distance. As we've seen before, the 7mm 08 was a 1,500 meter rifle in this particular loading. The 260 Remington is also a really good one. Bullets might be a little more, you might be a little more limited in your selection, and your ballistic coefficient is not quite as good as it is in the 7mm, but still you're talking 550 ballistic coefficient. And that's a really good choice too. Like for a deer rifle, if you want a long-range deer rifle, that might be the perfect choice for a long-range deer rifle. 243 Winchester is probably my favorite in this category, just because it's extremely easy to handle. There's hardly any recoil. It's like shooting a 22 almost. I mean, it just wiggles when you shoot it. And it's very cheap to reload. You got pretty good ballistics, like the coefficient is 500 on the 243 with the AMAXs is what I like to use. And your external ballistics are awesome. A great target shooting round is also great if you want to take out varmints like coyotes or gophers and stuff like that. You could even take out a deer pretty good, but you're going to want to be inside 1,000 meters probably for a deer. I wouldn't feel comfortable pulling the trigger on a deer with the 243 at 1,000. I'd want it to be a little closer, but still you're going to get out there pretty far with that little guy. So those cartridges are really good if you want efficiency, if you want the most bang for your buck. Now, when you move in a different category like your Magnums, your big cartridges that most people would consider to be long-range cartridges, you're going to want to look at like your 300 Win Mag is a great choice. That's really good. Mostly, you're going to find ammo for that thing pretty much anywhere. It actually is a currently fielded U.S. military sniper cartridge. It's loaded in the M24 rifle system that the U.S. Army uses right now. It's interchangeable. They use a long action so they can switch between the 300 Win Mag and the 308 or the 7.62. So the 300 Win Mag has really good exterior ballistics as well, and it's got a significant amount of power out there. Now, surprisingly, you wouldn't think of it, but because normally you think psychologically smaller bullet equals less power, but the 7mm have such good ballistic coefficients that the 7mm Remington Magnum is actually outpowering the 300 Win Mag by a bit at 1,000 meters. If you want to look at 1,500 meters, your 7mm Remington Magnum still has almost 500 foot-pounds of energy. That's enough to put down a medium-sized critter, whether that be a deer or a foreign invading guy or whatever in your Red Dawn situation, if God forbid that ever would happen. So that's a really good cartridge. Your 300 Win Mag is at 1,500. By comparison, is 364 foot-pounds, considerably less at that range. So once you start to get out there, maybe at the muzzle, some of these cartridges are going to outperform some of these others. But the ballistic coefficient is really what makes the game here. Once you really get out there, the tortoise kind of beats the hare, if you know what I mean, just because of the coefficient, I guess. So one of my favorites, again, is the 7mm Remington Magnum. If you want a really long-range center-fire Magnum that's going to be able to take out large game, even at pretty respectable distances, that's an excellent choice. Your Ultra Mags are also really fantastic. Your 7mm Remington Ultra Mag, that thing is a laser beam. One trade-off you're going to have with the Ultra Mags, and you can read about this more when you're looking at your particular caliber choices, is they do have quite a bit shorter barrel life because of throat erosion. You got so much powder smoking through that little hole with that big case and that little, that smaller diameter bore. It's kind of hard on your barrels. So a 300 Winchester Magnum actually might be desirable if you're going to shoot this thing a lot because it's not so overbore as a 7mm Remington Ultra Magnum. But your 300 Remington Ultra Magnum doesn't have the same problem as the 7mm Remington Ultra Magnum. So actually the 300 RUM is really good as well. Another one I want to draw your attention to is the 338 Lapua Magnum. You can read the history about this if you want to. I'll just do it real briefly. It was actually one of the first purpose-built anti-personnel sniper cartridges that was ever specifically built for that purpose. It was back in the 80s, I think it was. The United States Navy wanted a cartridge just purpose-built, but they wanted a precision long-distance cartridge. So they started developing the 338 Lapua Magnum off the 416 Rigby case. And I don't know what happened. They run out of money or something, or they lost interest, but they quit developing that. So Lapua out of Finland kind of took over, and they finished the development, and they ended up thickening the case on the 416 Rigby that it was based on. They thickened it quite a bit. So, I mean, that's already that's a thick cartridge case already, and they added quite a bit more metal in there for pressure issues because it's a real high-pressure cartridge. So that was one of the design factors they had to consider. But what they ended up with was a cartridge that was very, very inherently accurate because it was designed from the ground up to be that way, and very powerful. And also, one of the nice things about the Lapua Magnum is cases are available from Lapua or Norma, both of which have fantastic quality. So you don't have to worry about getting crappy cases or having to mess with, trimming your necks or a lot of those things that you really have to pay more attention to when you start getting like Remington or Winchester brass particularly. You can really be pounding your head against the wall trying to get good brass for those things. But if you get a Lapua Magnum, the only stuff that's available is like world-class brass. So I never even played with mine. I just pretty much load it up. I size it and I load it. So that's a great choice as well. The 338 Lapua Magnum is pretty much what I use in a lot of these videos where I'm doing extreme range stuff, like the mile-long shotter. That's what I zapped that beer can with at, 1,130 meters. So it's an excellent long-range cartridge, and it goes actually quite a bit beyond 1,700 meters, depending on atmospheric conditions. This is at sea level, and we'll explain more about that with ballistics. So I would highly recommend, if you want like a big Magnum that you could like confidently drop large game with at over 1,000 yards, the Lapua would be a good choice. Like if you're an elk hunter and you plan on shooting really far, that, or even, I don't have it listed here, but the 338 Remington Ultra Mag is going to have similar ballistics. The brass quality, you might have to pay more attention to that, but that's a really good cartridge ballistically. I'm not sure about the inherent accuracy. I haven't tried them. I know the Lapua has really good inherent accuracy, just the way the dimensions of the case all worked out. So that's the one I would recommend for sure. Another thing you'll notice here is we'll talk about briefly the 5.56 NATO. 223 Remington is the sporting version of that, a little bit different brass design and chamber design. But those, a lot of people, if you're using standard military loadings, your range is going to be pretty limited. You're only going to be able to get out 600 meters with like the old XM193 cartridge, just because the ballistic coefficient is so crappy, it's just slowing right down instantly. If you use, like, there's a lot more bullets come out nowadays, like the 68 grain Botel hollow points, you can get out to 800 meters with a 223. Now, this thing is going to be pushed around by the wind severely, and it's not going to really be hitting that hard at its max range. So you might be able to reach out 800 meters, but you're not going to put anything down very well. So that would be a good varmint cartridge or a target cartridge at those ranges. 500 meters, you still have a contender with the 68 grain loading with the 5.56 or the 223. You still got about 500 foot-pounds, a little less. So that's okay, but I would limit myself, especially for any kind of serious purposes, inside 500 meters. What are some of the other choices we looked at? 308 works fine. Again, that's limited to about 1,000 or 1,200, depending on your loading. But that's a world-class sniper rifle there. That's what pretty much everyone uses in the world for the most part. Not because of its ballistic superiority, but because of its ammo availability and continuancy with NATO particularly. So it's a NATO round. There's bazillions of them laying all over the face of the earth. You will not run out of shells for that thing, no matter what continent you're on. So that's a good choice for that kind of a situation. Now, the lower group of calibers, let's talk about these. You got your anti-material cartridges. The 338 Lapua is right on the border of being an anti-material cartridge, talking about taking out equipment and things like that. Your 408 Chey Tac is an anti-material cartridge. They claim that it's kind of on the border as well, but it's really a heavy rifle setup that requires, you're not going to be able to just tote it around as easily as you are with a deer rifle or something. And then you got your 416 Barrett, which has been getting a lot of attention, and then your 50 BMG. Now, your 50 BMG, as we seen a little bit earlier, in your typical military loadings is not really that superior to like some of these other cartridges. Actually, your 7mm Remington Magnum will outdistance a 50 BMG with its max supersonic range, because the 50 BMG in the M33 ball only got a ballistic coefficient of 633. And I mean, it's going to have a lot of power. So for anti-material purposes, taking out vehicles, taking out equipment in a military setting, that is definitely going to outperform the 7mm Magnum. But for just hitting stuff at long range, it's not really your choice. Now, when you use the custom bullets on the 50 BMG and you pay a lot of attention to reloading, and you use Hornady AMAXs or something like that, or some of these Barnes tactical bullets like I got here, it's all of a sudden a serious long-range contender. It'll go 2,700 meters, which is far beyond the range that any normal person will ever shoot in their life, unless you're in a really weird situation like an HTI team or something like that. But actually, the one, if you have like unlimited funds and you want the best long-distance cartridge in the world, you're going to want to get the 408 Chey Tac. Well, you're looking at the chart and you're saying, what about the 416 Barrett? Yep, its max supersonic range is 3,000, whereas the Chey Tac is only 2,600. Now, that's really far, but that plus mark I put on there because the Chey Tac is engineered in such a way that when the bullet passes through the transonic barrier, it remains stable as it goes subsonic. So actually, the max effective range of that cartridge is the maximum distance in which the bullet will fly. It can go subsonic for a long ways past 2,600 and still have enough remaining energy to take all kinds of stuff out. And we'll discuss that more in detail when we do our external ballistics. But the 408 Chey Tac, I think that's the rifle Mark Wahlberg uses on that movie where he's shooting so far or whatever. I think he's using like a Chey Tac M200. But the 408 Chey Tac is bar none right now the world's probably best for extreme range if you have like unlimited funds. They're expensive, and shells are only available from like one spot last time I checked. I think it's Lost River or something. They come out with the projectiles. You're going to be severely limited in ammo. But if you're like Bill Gates or you're one of these rich guys or something, and you can just afford anything, you could stockpile ammo too. I think it's a few bucks a shot. I don't remember how much it is for ammo. It's not ridiculous how expensive it is, but just the availability is terrible. So if you do end up getting something like a 408 Chey Tac or even a 416 Barrett, I would strongly recommend getting as many shells as you're going to need in your lifetime just right away in case something weird were to happen and you couldn't get a hold of any more ammo. So that's kind of the basic rundown of these cartridges. This is something a guy could visit about for weeks. But like I said before, I believe too much emphasis has been placed on cartridge selection. Even your typical sporting deer rifle cartridges are going to perform really well, far past any range you ever would have imagined. So if you've got, like I said before, 270 Winchester or 25-06 even, any of that stuff is really going to shoot a lot farther than you would have thought. So continue on with these videos. We're going to go into some the next video, which is going to cover bullet design, the projectile choice. This was cartridge choice. This was cartridge selection. Now we're going to talk more in detail about terminal ballistics and just kind of an introduction into bullet choice. So stay tuned.
Oh